Welcome to the Growth Zone. I am Christian Bartsch and I have a really interesting session for you today. Today I have with me Tony Guarnaccia. He is from Connecticut and provides services in the area of marketing, does coaching and as well advisory. So I've got for him 4 questions, and the main topic around what we'll be talking is about how businesses can use the current situation to improve the outcome of the business activities by using the right way, how marketing can help them to grow, and maybe even having significant changes that will give them a new life, new strength to have a better position once this whole pandemic has ended. And the 4 questions that I've got for him are following. What can a business do to grow if this is their reality? What are some of the red flags that can signal that a business is in trouble? What are a few of the small changes that any business can make right now to improve its cash flow? What is the one thing that small businesses should be doing during this crisis that we are experiencing now, and what they are actually not implementing in their business? And so let's get right into our conversation with Tony.
Okay.
So today I'm here with Tony Guarnaccia, and we'll have some really interesting topics for you. As I've already mentioned ahead, our key area of conversation for today is that for many businesses and resources of time and effort and money are tight right now, and that makes a big challenge for the companies. And so we'll be looking into how this can be changed to the advantage of small and medium-sized businesses. And Tony, can you please maybe tell us a bit more about yourself?
Sure, happy to do so. So my story begins when I was 12 years old. So I grew up in small business. My parents had a small Italian bakery, and they were fantastic bakers. Unfortunately, not the best business people. Not because of their own fault. A lot of times what I found is a lot of business owners don't know what they don't know. So there's certain areas where there's gaps in their knowledge, which causes them to fail. So at least in the United States, 70% of small businesses fail. And unfortunately, that was the reality that I found myself in when my parents' business failed. So we lost our homes. We had to live with my sister and kind of bounce back. Years later, I went to college. My thought was to redeem the past. I'm learning that now as I examine my history of myself. But I really looking back and understanding that that was the case. So I went to college, took entrepreneurship studies, got a business degree, and went back and started a second business. And this also with my parents. And this time we it was also a bakery. We did cakes, and we were able to mail these cakes across the country. And we were also able to put photos on top of them. So we created a business that wasn't really baking centered. It was centered around promotional products, the ability to use this as a gift. And so we had a lot of success with that out of the gate. We won the best new product at the New York Incentive Show, and we had celebrity clients like Jennifer Lopez, Jay-Z. We were able to mail cakes for IBM and Microsoft, huge companies. And so we were off to a great start. We were doing much better than the previous business because we had PR, we had celebrities, we had top search engine optimization. We were doing really, really well. Unfortunately, that business also failed because kind of like the first situation, there was gaps in our knowledge. And so that business, unfortunately, didn't make it either. And so that was when I found myself homeless again, living with a second sister of mine. And things were worse for me personally, because at that point, I had a baby on the way and I was newly married. So then I told myself, I said, clearly I don't know what I'm doing. Who does know? Who actually knows how to run a business at, the best and highest levels? And that's when I went on a journey to work with some of the best companies in the world. So over a decade, I worked with Google, Ford Motor Company, ADP, Chevrolet, so all of General Motors, Volkswagen, BMW, so a lot of the best companies in the world. And that brought me to my mission in life today, which is help small businesses, medium-sized businesses grow like the best companies in the world, and doing that through the best strategies, tools, and tactics that they leverage. So taking what these best companies do and then bringing it to small businesses that, to drive positive change.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. I have as well a background with BMW as well. I trained with BMW as well in business administration and that things. You learn a lot from these big companies. They're huge and massive. And if you go through different departments, you get so much on hand that usually you don't even get at the university or the business school. You can take that with you, and then those are valuable things that small businesses, whether it's your own business or somebody else's business, can really profit from it. As well, today I was just looking as well at several CVs that I got that was asked to go and get somebody for one of our business partners. And I was applying all the knowledge that I learned during BMW time, how to find and select the best people that you can get for your business, who have the best qualifications, best motivation, and as well fitting for the job.
Yes.
That's awesome. And so what was the key function? What were you doing for these? What was your role working for those companies?
Well, I was very fortunate because I can't really take the credit. I rode the wave. So at the time when I was getting hired, search engine optimization was brand new. And so I was able to get in through those opportunities. But then the big thing that hit was Google AdWords. So right when Google AdWords was coming out, and literally Google really didn't even have that many clients, I was able to do joint ventures with Google and Ford and all these companies to really grow each of those brands. So I rolled out the initial programs, digital advertising programs, for a lot of these enterprises like Ford, partnering with Google to make that happen. So ultimately that led me to getting Google's Partner of the Year in 2009. And, I was spending a ridiculous amount of money in advertising. So $400 million, those kinds of volumes. And so that was kind of my role. So to answer your question, I was running the digital advertising agency that had these massive clients.
Cool. That's really, really good. So you've got a good broad knowledge and understanding of what you can do, especially when you think of the budget, the huge amount of budget that you had for advertising allowed you as well surely to do tests as well in different levels and find out stuff that usually if you have just a small budget, you can't usually afford to run as an experiment or anything.
Yeah, it was wonderful because I had access to a ridiculous amount of money and full authority to do whatever I want with it, basically. And then I also had access to the people running this at the C level even. So I would meet with CMOs, from all these manufacturers so just to get that level of access at that age and at that, just the timing, it was just amazing. So, yeah, I thank God for it. That's the only solution. That's the only way I can think about it because, for me to go from where I basically went from being homeless to running Google's Partner of the Year in just 5 years. So it was really just an amazing thing that I was fortunate to take part of.
Cool. Definitely quite a good development as well. Yeah, let's go and jump into our first question that I've got here for you. And that's, what can a business do to grow if this is their reality?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the framework I always put things through is really what resources and what are your priorities at the end of the day. And it's really simple to think about it when there's really three to manage. And that those are time, effort, and money. So whenever you're trying to grow a business, stabilize a business, or scale a business, you want to look at how are you allocating your time, effort, and money. So if you're ready to scale and you want to go from 6 figures to 7 figures, 7 to 8, 8 to 9, and so forth, then really money is not as important as the effort and the time. So in other words, if that's the situation you're in, you want to spend more money to get results faster, which means you'll hire people. You want to shorten time so that you can really grow quickly. Now, if you're in crisis, which unfortunately so many of us are in that situation today, you want to do the exact opposite. So if you are in a cash tight position, the first thing you want to do is prioritize money. So you want to conserve cash, and you want to do it. There's really 2 perspectives I look at. One is profitability, so making sure you have more revenue than you do costs, which sounds kind of obvious, but most of us find ourselves in debt, delayed in payments, etc. Then the other component of that is cash flow. So when the money is coming in, and so I'll go into detail in those in a minute, but in that framework I just mentioned of your resources, you want to prioritize your money in a situation like this where we're facing the pandemic. Secondly, you're focused on your effort. So is there certain things you can do as opposed to outsourcing them, as opposed to having employees? It might be a good time to reevaluate your team. Are they doing the most they can? Is there any way to become more efficient, etc.? And then time. From a time perspective, most of us will want to extend our expectations. So if we are expecting to hit a certain growth number, a certain amount of revenue, et cetera, by the end of the year, we might want to reevaluate that given the new realities that we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some of the red flags that can signal that a business is in trouble?
Yeah, so if we look back at what I was mentioning a moment ago regarding cash flow and profitability, those are some of the first things you want to look at. So you want to make sure you have more revenue than the costs are coming in. And so that because you're delaying your payments, you don't have enough cash. So you want to always have a certain amount of profitability, at least 10 to 15% if you're a small business. So if you have 15% profit, and that includes, I'm not sure the audience size necessarily, but say, for instance, you're a consultant and you're a one-man shop or one-woman shop, you'd still want to include your salary within that number so that the profitability is above all your own personal expenses. So a lot of times business people will lump themselves into that. When I'm talking about profitability, it's like the real profitability, like if you were to sell the company. So that's one perspective you want to think about, is how much money you have at the end of the day. And you can evaluate that by looking at your costs. Like when the pandemic hit, one of the first things I did was I went through all my expenses and said, hey, this is something I can eliminate. This is something I can negotiate. There's different things I can do with these expenses to make sure we're staying profitable. And even that, we're all in this together. It can be still difficult, which I completely understand, but you want to at least go through that exercise. Now, the second thing you want to do is look at your cash flow. So when is the money coming in? So if you're finding that people are delaying in paying you, you want to get on that right away. You want to call the people that are behind, but also from the other perspective is paying out. You want to delay paying as much as possible. So you from a time perspective, looking at that paradigm again, how can you extend your payments out and speed up the payments coming in? And so there's a number of ways we can get into how to do that. I can go into detail later, but I just want to make sure I answer your question clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So in the end, it's a multi-strategy of speeding up one thing and slowing down the other thing. So actually, then you have a change of balance. And when you look at that, what are a few of the small changes that any business can make right now to improve its cash flow? When you look at what you've told us just now.
Yeah, so I gave you a snapshot, but to get into more detail, what you want to do is go through all your receivables and call the people that are behind. I just mentioned that one. The other thing that you can do for your cash flow is barter. Now's a great time to barter. So if you have expenses, it's a good idea to see if you might be able to barter those services that you still need in exchange for your services. Now, there's still probably tax ramifications for doing that, but you're not going to have to deal with that in the immediate. So immediate fix is to focus on improving that money coming in. The other thing you can do is renegotiate on the other side what your costs are. So for instance, I use a QuickBooks, for accounting. And what I noticed was I was paying monthly. And so what I did was I called them and I said, hey, can I get a discount if I pay for the full year now? Because even though it's going to take some cash out now because it's a recurring payment, that's going to save me money. And it's fairly inexpensive anyway. So going through all your different expenses and seeing if you can negotiate them. Also, just pick up the phone. So one of the things I did for my web hosting, I called my web host provider and I said, hey, due to the current circumstances, do you have any special deals? And they said, well, yes, actually, we're reducing our fees by half. So I literally saved 50% for 2 months just by simply picking up the phone and asking my vendors for a discount. So things like that can be very, very powerful, and they're just very easy to do. So it's something that every one of us can do. On the flip side of getting revenue, because the other part of this, of course, is increasing your revenue. Now's a great time to go back to your past customers, clients, patients, etc., and ask them what they're doing, if they need help with anything, and always leading with value, not from a sales perspective, but simply calling your past people that you have relationships with and asking them what they're up to, if they need help. And then a lot of times out of those conversations, there can be sales opportunities that arise. It's also a very good time to be building community. So one of the things I've been focusing on is creating a community called the Results Club, where people can come in, ask me questions anytime, and I'm doing it at a very, very inexpensive rate. So it's very accessible. And so this is helpful for people, if they're stuck in something, they can just simply ask the question and not have to be, wasting hours and hours trying to figure something out. And so that's my effort to build community. But that's something all of us should be doing, is connecting with people and bringing them together, because that also spurns opportunities and it creates, loyalty for when we come out of the situation on the other side.
Oh yeah, that's good. So in the end, this community that you're building, that you're talking about, is partly you're building a new followership of potential customers in the end.
Correct. Yes. So it's a win-win. They're getting value at a very inexpensive, like literally I'm charging $1 just to get started, just because I really want to help people during this crisis. But it's also, you're right, it's a way to open up client opportunities down the road. It's a way to help people. It's a way to build, community, retention. It's actually a great thing for retention. So all my past clients, I'm giving them free access. So there's just a lot of benefits to building community right now.
Cool. So looking at that, what is the one thing that small businesses should be doing during this crisis that they aren't doing?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. So what I've learned over the years in dealing with crisis is that, and I'll tell you a story. My mother actually went through a serious pandemic in the late 1930s through the 50s, 60s, etc. And that was called polio. So back in 1938, or I think, it was around the late 30s, she contracted polio. And from the age of 9 months old all the way up to 13, 14 years, she couldn't walk. And so I asked her, I said, how did you possibly survive that situation? Because like nowadays, she was quarantined, didn't have access to people, loved ones, etc. Also, they had ventilators back then. They called iron lugs. So it was a very similar situation to what we have today. And it was affecting children primarily. And so, I asked her, how do you actually survive something like that? And she said, you have to break things down. You have to break things down into small steps. And so that was the inspiration for my book that's coming out called Small Steps to Grow Profits. And it really breaks down how to become more resilient in your life and in your business. And that resiliency really comes down to small steps. And that the reason I say that is because you don't want to be overwhelmed. But there's a process for these steps. So the first thing you want to do with your steps is know what steps to take. Then you want to know how to take those steps. And then finally, you want to take action. You need to actually take those small steps. Now, most people, most business owners, most entrepreneurs, they focus on step number 2, which is how do I take the steps? How do I do SEO? How do I do podcasting? How do I do Facebook? How do I do public speaking? You name it. Where what I found working with the best companies in the world and with people that are resilient and overcome adversity, they start with the first one, the first step, which is what steps do I need to take? And even beyond that, why do I need to take those steps? So the one thing that I think businesses should be focusing on now is the what, which is your strategy. So now is the perfect time to be developing your plan for understanding if you have to pivot, if you have to change, and really looking at exactly what steps you need to take before you ask the question of how to take them.
Yeah, definitely. So I can as well relate with the iron lung topics because my mother, when she finished studying medicine in London, she went then as a physiotherapist and worked as well in a hospital and had to work with patients that were in iron lungs and that. I still remember telling me about that as a kid. Yeah, that's definitely something that as well as a big impact for people who experience that time, and they see, of course, what we're seeing now in a very different perspective than maybe we are doing, who haven't had this kind of direct one-to-one experience, and that's vital. And when you look at it, what businesses now have to do, they have to definitely change their habits of reacting and that, and to just be ahead of the game. And as you said, as well, building community and all these things, it's planting the seeds that we need. That eventually we can as well come out of this whole craziness with greater strength and ability. And yeah, so just let me have a look at my notes that I've got here, because it was really very interesting what you were telling us about, especially when you look at the thing of how much time and money we usually have, plus the effort that we are willing to invest. But then, of course, whether it's a good time where we've got plenty of money, or when it's a bad time where we obviously have scarcity of money, and then start thinking that maybe money isn't there in scarcity, although it's actually abundance. We just need to get the money to come to us. Yeah. And yeah, so what examples do you have, for instance, when you look at how businesses can do? What do you think is the industries that are most tight at the moment?
Well, obviously the most impacted that I've seen would be travel, at least here in the States, because those have really been locked down. Travel and hospitality, that's a very difficult situation. And even some of the best entrepreneurs in the world, like Richard Branson, are struggling with Virgin Airlines. So that is definitely a very difficult situation. And so that is where they really have to figure out how to pivot. But in some circumstances, I mean, it's such a difficult situation that is a very, very hard one to even suggest, because they have so many. One thing that's dangerous for companies like that, and why a lot of times, people wonder, why is Google worth so much? Why are all these, internet businesses worth so much? They don't really have any assets. But that, in fact, is the point. I mean, it's very difficult when you're a manufacturer, when you have all what are called fixed assets, all these assets that are great sometimes, but in today's reality, and especially in the world during, crisis, they're really hindering them. And so the airlines are in a tough spot because they have so many expenses tied to these airlines. Just having the plane sitting costs a fortune because you have to maintain them even when they're on the ground. So it's those kinds of business models where they're dependent on, everything working correctly in the world. But then on top of that, have a lot of costly fixed assets. Same thing with hospitality. I mean, these hotels are just sitting. They still have to be maintained. So those are some of the industries I think are most impacted.
Yeah, definitely. Because you look at people, of course, starting to travel now around, even whether it's inside USA or Canada or Europe and so on. As we see, of course, the airlines are trying to as well promote I recently saw a video from Turkish Airlines where they showed how they were taking the best effort to provide a good, safe travel, but at the same time, a best as possible, let's say, comfortable travel. Because who likes sitting like for 2, 3, or even 6 hours in a plane with a mask on?
Right.
It's just not very interesting, not very nice. And the same thing we're seeing as well with retail, because many people were locked down and they said, okay, I have to order stuff online. Suddenly they decide, I'm not going to order, or I'm not going to go into a shop and buy, whether I'm buying myself a new Weber grill, or I'm going to go and or buy roller skates or that kind of stuff. I go online. I order stuff from Amazon and these other places that have already prepared. For instance, recently I just got delivered this week a new Weber grill, ordered on Amazon. I wasn't bothered to go maybe 10 minutes up to the shops and to go and get one there. I just didn't bother. Why should I carry it back home or go there and then they haven't got the one in stock that I want, and then I just ordered online.
Yes,
and it's crazy. It works. And the same thing is with shoes and other kind of stuff. And it changes the mindset of people. And then we are, of course, going to see how are people going to react once the hotels are open. Well, if you say, okay, I want to go to a hotel where I can go swimming, you take your kids with you and so on, and I say, oh, the swimming pool isn't open, or the sauna, or the sports, the fitness area, then I have no reason to go there.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's very true.
And suddenly you have the competitive advantage of a hotel that has these facilities is gone. And then you say, why should I go there? And then I have no reason to go on holiday because I can't use them anyway. Or if it's so overcrowded and you feel uncomfortable, unsafe, you don't want to go there either. And then people, I think, are going to start deciding, okay, we'll do a much nicer holiday next year. This year, okay, we'll do something, at least to keep the kids happy. But it's not going to be that a big expenditure as we would usually do. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Well, and to your point, looking at e-commerce and why companies like Amazon have been so successful is they're really customer centric. So they don't think of themselves as selling the grill. They think of themselves as satisfying the buyer's needs in the best possible way. So they look at it from the buyer's perspective and what they want, as opposed to their perspective of selling something. And now is a really good time for every business to evaluate what are they actually providing, because the thing they're offering isn't really special anymore. So they really have to look through the lens of what's going to satisfy the buyer's needs the most, right? So your competition is not necessarily your direct competitor. It's other alternatives, right? Or even if you look at, the way marketing's gone, there's been what I call you're seeing more democratization of marketing, but you're also seeing what I call the marketing revolution. So marketing has changed dramatically. So when it started, it's very simple. You just place an ad and you get some business. Then as broadcast came out, it got more competitive. There's a lot more fragmentation, a lot more places to advertise, etc. And then it's just gotten worse and worse. Now you have the internet, and then you have social media, now internet-enabled devices. So what I found is really three things that have been problematic with the marketing revolution. One, the fragmentation, meaning that you're competing for attention. So you're not competing just with your competitors. You're competing with the likes of Amazon and Netflix for people's attention, Hollywood studios. So your competitor is not who you think it is. It's literally everybody now from attention perspective. You're also seeing more challenges with from that fragmentation is the clutter. So even if you are, able to penetrate your market, how do you actually stand out? Like, that's what's so important. And that's where, these little shops have a disadvantage, because it is easier to go to Amazon. So how do you mitigate that through better service? So again, that's why I say really evaluating what are you providing, because if it's just the product, you're already in deep trouble.
Exactly. And that's at least some of the shops who already are selling their products online, at least they have a chance that you can then go and at least get the stuff. Because, for instance, with the Weber grill, there's no gas unit delivered with it. Yeah. So you have to order it from somebody else. So at least another shop was able to sell that package. other than having it standing in their shop inside and nobody buying it because somebody just needed that one. So it had advantages that it got one unit sold, although I'm actually living 800 miles away from the shop, which is an advantage, and it came overnight. So that's a big advantage for those shops that are using it.
Yes.
But those shops, of course, as you say, they have one actually big disadvantage. It's not only just standing out of the clutter and as well having their own positioning, but they're actually falling. Even if they're using something like Amazon, they actually have nothing because they haven't got any real visibility, and they have no drive that people go to their direct shop, whether it's an online shop or so. There's no need or no reason for me to go and visit their website, because 70% of product search happens on Amazon nowadays.
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. And that's where, I think re-envisioning the business, what it is. So maybe just thinking out loud here, but a business like that might want to invest more in a content strategy. So, showing people how to set it up, how to cook on it, videos, more content like that makes it more engaging. I think that's where businesses should start thinking and saying, okay, how do I broaden what I do? For that defined niche. So being the best you can to helping solve that overall customer's problem. Because, like the old saying, they're not buying the drill, they're buying the hole. Same thing here. They're not buying the grill, they're buying the experience of the grilled food that everybody loves, and the, people loving coming over, the community, the taste of it. They're not buying just simply the grill. So looking at your customer from that perspective is something that Amazon's done really well and that small businesses can emulate.
Yeah, definitely. And when you look at even at big retailers, they have a similar problem. They are so used to being the big, like the Macy's and so on, being the big animal in the market, and everybody goes to the big shop. You go to these big malls. And a few years ago, I flew to Fort Myers, and we decided, okay, we'll go and get some stuff. Got an Uber and asked him to take us to the next mall, and he looked at us. What do you want in a mall? Most of them are anyway shut. There isn't anything happening. And that's like, I think 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And today the malls are even more dying. Many shops are empty on that, but still the big retailers who maybe even have their own malls and sublet out the space that they don't actually need. They've got a big issue because they as well have to get people in, and they have a massive cost with the property. Even if they own the property, they have to pay tax for it. They have to maintain it, protect it, clean it, all the whole stuff. And that's the thing. Would you say, how could a retailer that has similar situation, can they go by using a content strategy like you suggested for the small companies, or would you have something else in mind?
Yeah, so for the bigger companies, I think they have to evaluate where their strengths are. And this goes back to classic schooling that you might get through MBA, which is a SWOT analysis, really understanding your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and understanding how can you position yourself to take advantage of those strengths and mitigate the weaknesses. So, it's a very broad topic, but for the bigger companies, they obviously have some scale, and there's some businesses have done well. For a while, Best Buy was actually doing quite well with their growth because they're so focused on a niche. I think it's very broad-based retailers. It's very difficult. So if you're trying to sell sofas over here and televisions over here and office supplies, you're doing too much. So I think reevaluating again who your customer is and why you're the obvious choice. So I think even small businesses, one thing they should be thinking about is their value proposition, and that value proposition answers the question in the buyer's mind: why should they work with you as opposed to anyone else, or do nothing at all? And that's the fundamental question. I think a lot of businesses, whether they're Fortune 500 companies or whether they're startups, they really want to look at things through that lens. So I think the answer to your question is starting with value. So that's essentially what people want. They want value. And the value is really the difference between where someone is today and where they ultimately want to go. And so if you haven't first defined what their end result is, you're not going to be able to fulfill their value proposition. And that, again, the end result is not the product. The end result is, how they feel after getting the product, the feeling and emotion can a lot of times be much more powerful, because again, they're not getting that grill just for the grill. They're getting it to cook the food. But really what they might be asking, you want to ask a question 4 or 5 times, like, why are they doing it? At the end of the day, it might be to impress their friends when everybody comes over for a cookout, because, some grills have higher, it's just like a car, like actually going back to BMW and automotive. This is something I learned there. So if you look at automotive manufacturers, they've done a fantastic job of this, because every car is for a different personality. Because if you took the model that a lot of people think about, they think of a car as transportation. It's getting from A to B. When reality is that's not why people buy cars. A lot of times they buy cars for status. I mean, you could buy a Bugatti, but it's going to get you there roughly the same way a Volkswagen would. But why would the people buy the Bugatti? They're buying for the status. So a lot of times the product is more than what the product is. And I think that is the opportunity for a lot of us to look at and see how can we really serve our customers that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where these big retailers and these big corporations and so on that are now currently really suffering, because maybe they have neglected over the years the digital footprint in the market. That shows where they are going to have to really put more effort into it. And as well, unfortunately, as well, more money.
Yes.
And even if they haven't, they have to go and fund themselves to get the cash and really spend it big, but in an intelligent and focused way. And maybe even, as you said, maybe even reevaluate whether their product range even makes any sense to the buyer. Because if you've got too much stuff messed up and some of the stuff just isn't even selling or doesn't even somehow make sense, because let's say if I want to go into a big retailer and I want to buy a barbecue set, of course, if they have stuff for garden and so on, that might be sensible, because maybe I need some deck chairs. Maybe I need some stuff to maybe paint my deck, or use stuff against all the flies and other kind of stuff. And that's good if I can get that. But maybe I'm not going to go and buy a new sofa there, because I don't need a sofa with my grill.
Right.
Yeah, but that's so having the right complementary settings that it all makes sense, instead of having like a jumble of stuff just across, where you can go there for every kind of stuff, but it doesn't really make sense, because people, I think, now are much more focused even when they're going shopping, other than just saying, oh, we just write down and what else do we need? We need peas, we need carrots, and we need a sofa, and we need that. I'm not going to go and buy my peas and my carrots and my meat and my grill and my sofa at the same place at the same time.
Yes. So, yeah, absolutely. I think the other opportunity is focusing more on service. So figuring out how can I better serve. It's all the same question, though. It goes back to value. Like, how do I provide the value that the customer wants to actually buy, as opposed to what I want to sell? But I think, just because I work with so many businesses, I find a lot of them lacking on the service end. That's probably a fantastic opportunity for growth too. Again, Amazon's done a fantastic job with that. But even with them, I just read the other day, there's a company in Korea, a retailer in Korea, I believe, where you can order by midnight and get it by 7 a.m. the next day. So even there's ways to, kind of improve on what Amazon's doing, because there's companies that are improving it. So it's just, the world is changing and you want to be ahead of the changes, not behind them.
Exactly. And when we look at all different areas as well, like, for instance, social media areas, well, before there was MySpace and other kind of places all around the world. And nowadays, there are just a few. And even those few are not going to be here forever. Like Facebook, for instance, where now so many advertising big brands are saying they don't want to advertise on places like Facebook and so on. And then, of course, at the same time, maybe people are not that much in Facebook at the moment. So they're trying to cut out all the noise that's there. So they are going to go maybe and focus to actually get the people more where they are, and where they are maybe having more space to offer more attention. And maybe even old strategies like billboards and so on will be coming back again.
I agree. I mean, I'm a big fan of direct mail, because I think that, direct mail was so people it had such a bad reputation for so long, people really moved away from it. But at least my mailbox, I'm really not getting that much direct mail. So I think direct mail is a fantastic place to reach your audience because you can be so specific and there's really not as much, we talked about previously the clutter and the fragmentation. You're not really dealing with that so much when it comes to direct mail.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you think of it, so many people nowadays don't bother to send stuff through the mail. They just go the cheap way, sending emails, and the email and land in the spam and so on. And I know I was several years ago, I was running as well direct mail campaigns for my own business, and we had like a conversion rate of 8%, which was cool. When you think of it, that in average, we used to have like maybe at best of times, maybe 1%. So that it shows that actually there's so much that's happening online and so little in the offline world, where people then suddenly notice, oh, I've got a letter, and then take the time and read it instead of looking at their tablets or phones because they already are getting made aware by apps and so on, and they're maybe spending too much time, or the kids even complaining that we are spending too much time because we complain to them they're spending too much time on their tablets. So people are maybe taking more time for these things, which is a good advantage for those who are thinking, how can I do that and be smarter in a way and not do the same thing as one did like 30, 40 years, but doing it in a more fresh and modern style.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's tremendous opportunity there. I mean, people are trained to really look forward to getting the mail nowadays because of places like Amazon. Because you think of it almost as getting a gift. So people like going to the mailbox, except for the bills, of course. But aside from that, people, I think, are more open to mail than ever before.
Yeah, and even I think even nowadays, so many bills come electronically, so it's not that more of a scary thing to go to the mailbox. So
yeah,
just in your Outlook, you'll have the invoices and so on, but your direct letterbox at home, it's usually free of clutter unless you get some nasty letter from somebody.
Yes,
but otherwise, most of the time it'll be something interesting, and you decide, okay, that's really good. And that's a nice thing. So it was great having you here on the show, Tony. Yeah, and I hope to have you some in the future where we'll be discussing some other interesting topics and provide some value for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I probably didn't get a chance to answer everyone's questions here. So if anyone does have a question and they want to ask me something outside of this, happy to answer that. Just email me at Tony@meettonyg.com. So Tony@meettonyg.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions that we hit on today.
Great. I'll add as well that into the comments so that for those who maybe have problems writing it down, they just can copy and paste it and it's easy as well to get in touch with you. So have a great week and we'll have our next episode very soon.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's all for today's episode of The Growth Zone. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Spotify so you never miss an episode. Plus, if you haven't got your signed copy of the marketing book, stop by on our website at book.prmediareach.com and hurry, because the reserved batch of signed books are almost sold out. So the address is book.prmediareach.com. I'll repeat, book.prmediareach.com.